This tiny little device is definitely my favorite switch from Ubiquiti at the moment. This is the Flex 2.5G POE version. This tiny little switch definitely packs a lot of power and it's definitely become my go-to switch. So let's look at the port configuration on the front. It has 8 2.5 gigabit PoE++ ports on the front here. We have this new combo port that we've not seen on Ubiquiti switches before, not that I'm aware of, which is basically you can use either one or the other or both. So you can use PoE++ to power and you can take data from that as well, but also you can use the SFP+ port on here to get 10 gig to your uplink. So you have an option to use either 10 gig Ethernet or 10 gig SFP+, and then you have a 54 volt DC input that you can get a lot more power from the PoE ports on here. Now this is the 210 watt adapter that you can buy with it. It is fairly chunky in size, but it gives you a decent amount of power from it, and you'll probably see the 210 watt on there. This has actually come from the USW Ultra, so you can use that same one. If you have one of those spares, you can go ahead and use that, or you can go ahead and buy it separately from the UI store. Inside the box you get the unit itself, you get a pack of screws, and you get a mounting unit that you can mount to a wall or a desk, wherever you want to pop this and get this set up. Now, before we jump over to the computer, I'm going to show you everything you need to know about getting this set up. So I'm going to be using this power adapter just here. So this is 210 watts going straight into here. We can power that up. I'm going to use the PoE++ input to give myself an uplink to the aggregation switch. Now, if you have a long enough DAC cable that you can go ahead and plug this into your aggregation switch, you can go and do that. Or if you want to use Ethernet, so an RJ45 to SFP+ adapter, you can also go and use that too. This is what I have here. I have one on the other side, which is going into my aggregation switch, which we'll have a look at shortly. And this is going to do the job for me for now. I have my machine right next to me, which I'm going to plug in, and I have a machine behind me, which we're going to run some tests against a little bit later in this video. This is the unit itself on the UI website, and we can see, as we've mentioned, 8 port PoE++ and 2.5 gigabits with 10 gig Ethernet and SFP+ combo, and it says can be powered with a PoE++ adapter or an AC power adapter. So we're using the AC power adapter down here, and you can see with that 210 watt adapter I have 196 watt worth of PoE available to me with the optional AC power adapter. Depending on what you're using to power these devices, if you're just using it for network, then you definitely don't need the PoE version, you can go for the non-PoE version. But if you're using it to power devices, you need to think about what you're powering and how much power it's going to take. So the 10 gig PoE++ input will allow you 76 watts worth of power, PoE++ will allow you 46 watts worth of power, and PoE+ will allow you 16 watts worth of power. So keep that one in mind depending on what you're setting up. Now, if you're looking at an E7, which I know is Wi-Fi 7 and 10 gigabits, but if you're looking to plug it into a 2.5 gig switch, you need to keep in mind this takes 43 watts worth of power. The U7 Pro Max, which is probably something more likely that you're likely to plug into this takes 25 watts worth of power. Something like the AI Pro, you're looking at 11 watts for just the device, and if you have the enhancer on it, then you're looking at 22 watts. So those wattages that it can give you can add up quite quickly. So do keep in mind, depending on what you are setting up. I mean, if you're using something like a Flex, I mean, you can have a few of those plugged in and that's not going to be an issue. But yeah, that's definitely one to keep in mind when you're getting this set up. In terms of additional accessories that you can buy, so here's the 210 watt adapter at $79. So you can go ahead and purchase that separately. You no longer need to purchase another switch or anything else to get this unit. You can buy the PoE++ adapter, which is the 60 watt version. I'm probably going to take a stab and say there may be a PoE++ version coming soon. I would think maybe that would be something that might be coming. And then in terms of mounting, you've got two additional options. You have a floating mount, which you can go ahead and plug in, and then once you get it set up, it looks something like that. Or you have the DIN rail version, so if you have it set up on a DIN rail itself, you can have it set up like this. So there's a lot of different options with this switch in terms of what you can do and how you can get set up, which is why it is my favorite one, because of the amount of flexibility you have with it. So let me show you my setup that I have currently. So I have my UDM Pro Max at the top, and I have my aggregation switch, and I have the 2.5 gigabit switch going into there. So if I go to the Ubiquiti devices, you can see my aggregation switch is 10 gig to the UDM Pro Max, and my USW Flex 2.5G is going to 10 gig as well. So we have a quick look at the connectivity on the side, and we can see the 10 gig uplink just there, which is great. That's everything I need to make sure I have the maximum bandwidth that I can utilize here. And we have two computers connected to this right here. If we go to Port Manager, you'll see my Mac Studio, which is running at 2.5 gig, and you will also see my PC, which I'm connected to right now, which is what I'm running this from, is also connected at 2.5 gigabits per second. In terms of the settings, there isn't really too much. One thing is when you have the adapter plugged in, you can see the amount of PoE power that's in use, so you can make sure you're not going over. Currently, I don't have any PoE devices plugged in, so it's 0 of 196, but perhaps I'll plug something in towards the end so we can actually see that increase. If we go to the insights, we have the system stats that are on here, so we can see the CPU and memory on here, and then finally we can go to the settings. So you can set the external power adapter, 210 watts or 60 watts. And then we have the network options that are standard and the global switch settings. So nothing really untoward in here that you would generally not see in any other switch from Ubiquiti. Going into port manager, if we click on a specific port itself, we have the port name, we have the port, whether it's active or disabled or restrictive, the native VLAN, whether you want to allow all the tagged VLANs, the PoE power if you want to push through to it. And then the advanced stuff is whether you want to do switching or mirroring, whether you want the link speed to auto negotiate, and also the Ethernet port profile, port isolation, storm control, loop protection, and egress limits, and spanning tree protocol. This is all the standard stuff that you would see. There's probably a few extra settings when you go to some of the bigger switches like the Pro Max or the Pro HD, but for this is what's included within here. Now the reason I've set all of this up is because I want to run a test between the two. So I have these two different devices running on two different VLANs. One's on my home network, one's on the management network, and I want to run a quick throughput speed test and see what we're getting. So currently I have this machine which I'm connecting to the Mac that's sat behind me at this point. And if I go and run a speed test just here, and then you can see we're getting around 13 or 1400 megabits per second in terms of download, and then 2.4 gigabits per second in terms of upload. So we're almost maximizing that. Now you're probably wondering, well, why am I getting this sort of speed? So if I quickly do a trace route to the IP, you'll see we're going all the way to the UDM Pro Max, and then we're going to the Mac Studio. So the VLAN routing is going all the way up and then coming back down again. Now that's one thing to keep in mind. Currently I'm running this test with IPS and IDS enabled, and what I'm going to go ahead and quickly do now is disable IPS and IDS on this network. So settings, security, and we're going to do this together right now. So we'll go off and we'll turn off intrusion prevention and click apply. We'll give that a few minutes before we run this test again. This is currently the download speed with IPS and IDS disabled. And if we have a look at the upload speed, I'm imagining that's going to be around 2.45 gigabits per second. It's going to give us the maximum that we can get out of it. And there we go. So that's 2.458 gigabits per second. So a really good speed in terms of that with IPS and IDS disabled. So keep that one in mind when you are running your speed tests or how to maximize your speed across your network. If you want high-speed devices, perhaps keeping them on the same VLAN will give you a better result. So I've re-enabled IPS and IDS again, and I've switched them over to the same network just to show you what happens within here. So if I now do a trace route to 10.10.10.190, and that's the machine you'll see right up here that we're connecting to, you can see it doesn't go to the gateway now because it's within the same VLAN. So it goes directly straight to this. And if I go and run the speed test now, I have no doubt that it will give me 2.5 gig up and 2.5 gig down because we're not routing through the gateway. We don't need the VLAN going across a different network, going back to the UDM Pro and then coming to the other network. So we don't need that anymore. So keep that one in mind when you get this set up. So we've finished the upload there. That's 2.5 gig up and down. Now let's take a quick look at some of the switches that are available and where this sort of sits within the lineup. The Flex 2.5 Mini comes as what we would call a utility switch at this point. And there's a bunch of these that you've seen across the market within the UniFi lineup. So we have the light versions, which is the 8 and the 16 port. These have been out a little while. They're gigabits. Only half of the ports are enabled for PoE, so you don't get the most out of them. And they're 45 watt and 52 watt, depending on what you're looking to power. We have the Enterprise 8 PoE. Now this is a 2.5 gigabit PoE switch, and it's $479. Now the advantage of this one is it's a layer 3 switch. So where we were losing that speed with the VLAN routing, this is something that can pick up the routing and can help with the layer 3 switching. We have the Pro version, which is a gigabit version, but it has 120 watts again. So some of these are a little bit older in terms of what they are. They've been out quite a while. But you'll see the USW Ultra came out at some point last year, and there was a 60 watt and 210 watt version, and we can probably have a quick look at them side by side. We can probably have a quick look at these two side by side. I do have it right here, so we'll brush across that just towards the end. And then the other variety of the Ultra was $129, and this is where the Flex 2.5 PoE comes in. So $199 for the PoE version and $159 for a non-PoE version. So both really good value for money, I would say, in terms of the current switch lineup, the amount that you're getting from this and the value for money from the ports. Even if you include the adapter at $79, it's really good value for money in terms of the switch. There are a couple of other smaller ones like the Flex Mini 2.5G and the Flex Mini, which is the older versions, and the Flex Outdoor version. There is also a Flex 10 gig version, which was 4 10 gig ports and 1 gigabit uplink port. Again, that's $299. So to get the 10 gig ports, there's no PoE available on that one. It's $299. In terms of all of these utility switches, I think without a doubt, my first choice would always be the 2.5 gigabit Flex. If you can get that, it's within your budget. If you get something, for example, like a Cloud Gateway Max or a Cloud Gateway Ultra, and you want the extra 2.5 gig ports, well, this is going to do it for you. And it gives you PoE too. This is the last thing I'm going to show you. So on my access switch in front of me, I have a couple of cameras plugged in and I have some UniFi access stuff plugged in. So if we take a quick look at the client devices, so if we take a quick look at the UniFi devices and we look at the Flex 2.5G, we have a few items on here which are powered by PoE. And if we go into Port Manager, we can see the amount of power that they're using at the moment, 8 watts, 2.3 watts, 1.89 watts, so very minimal power at this point. And we go back to the front again and you can see down here the amount of power that's in use. So at the moment we have 13.4 watts, which is being taken out of 196. This is the USW Ultra, and if we have a quick look and comparison in terms of size wise, you can see the thickness is probably the same, there or thereabouts. In terms of the depth and the width, the Flex 2.5G is a little bit bigger. Keep in mind this only does PoE Plus, and again on the back if you want there's a PoE Plus input, so you can go and power that. And this was the Flex Mini. I don't think this is really much of a comparison, but this is the 5-port version, which is non-PoE, and how that sits up against, and in terms of the fatness, it's a little bit thinner. Unfortunately, I don't have the non-PoE version to do a comparison against to show you what that looks like with this, but maybe something for a future video. Let me know your thoughts on this switch. If you're going to be picking one of these up, I mean, for sure, this is definitely my favorite one. And I think I've said that about 20 times in this video. So let me know down in the comments how many times I've actually said that. For now, this is Inside Wire, and I'll see you in the next one.